Hello and welcome to everyone who has joined us for this, the latest of Sales Layer webinars entitled How to Kickstart Your E-commerce to Boost Sales. My name is Alvaro Verdoy, CEO and co-founder of Sales Layer, and today I am very pleased to welcome Isaiah Bollinger from the digital agency Trellis, who are based in Boston, Massachusetts, and have a long and successful history of helping companies in their digital transformation onto e-commerce platforms such as Magento, WooCommerce, and Shopify. As such, he has an in-depth insight into the challenges facing marketers in the e-commerce space and how they can fix their problems to become successful. Welcome, Isaiah.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm excited to be part of this.
Yep. But before we get started, a little housekeeping. Should you have any questions or comments during the webinar, please place them in the chat box on the right-hand panel on the screen and leave your email. We will answer you directly. Please note that also a recording of the webinar will be available after the event, and we will be sending a link to all attendees. Okay. So, Isaiah, perhaps you could give us a brief overview on the history of Trellis.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started the company in 2012. Like a lot of people, kind of stumbled into it, saw an opportunity. I've been working for a larger firm, and they were doing some work in the digital space, but I felt like they were really falling short. So I decided to kind of take my own chance at solving that problem, mainly in the SMB space. So I actually didn't start out intending to solve the e-commerce problem, but quickly, as I was trying to help SMB companies with their digital needs, realized that e-commerce was a major need in general, and kind of a niche that I didn't feel like was being filled very well. So yeah, that's kind of how we transitioned into Trellis, and over time we've kind of evolved and built around technologies that we think are kind of the best in the industry, like Shopify, Magento, BigCommerce, WordPress, WooCommerce, and a few others. And we're constantly kind of evaluating the technologies out there. We always want to be on top of what we think is best for our customers, and not just what's best for us, so.
Okay. So we have also been hearing of your association with another agency, GrowthSpark.
Yeah.
What is the situation here?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's things that you are mixing here.
Yeah, so to clarify that, Trellis and GrowthSpark have merged together. We had a long relationship with GrowthSpark and the founder, Ross, who's now our chief operating officer. After kind of a little bit of evaluation, it was pretty obvious there was a good fit there, and we merged together. And Trellis, being a larger organization, is now the main brand. We're definitely going to be keeping GrowthSpark brand alive. For now, it's going to be staying as is, but we'll probably be making some adjustments to the brand and what the GrowthSpark brand will be used for in the future. But that's still a little bit to be determined. So yeah, at this point, the main company now is Trellis, and we're a one unified company. So we executed the merger in November, and now we're fully merged. We went through a lot of pain and a lot of long nights, and it's a unified company. But so now it's to us, it's all about improving the company, which is exciting. So it's almost kind of like a new beginning in a lot of ways. So.
Okay, perfect. How is it sharing space all together?
So we've been very distributed.
Different cultures, right?
Yeah, so they were already a distributed company, and we were also a distributed company. So from that perspective, it's worked fine. I mean, that culturally wasn't too difficult. I think the biggest cultural shift and change is they had been a small company for a long time, and now we're a much larger organization combined. So getting used to being a larger organization and is definitely I'd say the biggest challenge. So.
Okay, great. So perhaps you could explain why companies do turn to Trellis in the first place. What challenges are they having when they come to you?
Yeah, so I think there's the obvious answer where they want to go with a specific technology that we specialize in, and like a Shopify or Magento or BigCommerce or WordPress, and there's a few other technologies. and they may have a very specific idea of what they want, and they need someone to execute on that. But I think what we're really finding that makes us special, and we really care a lot about, is that most people don't, they might even think they know what they want, but at the end of the day, they really don't know what they want, and they're not really experts on these platforms or e-commerce, and there's a lot they just don't know. So we really have the strategy capabilities to help them figure out what they want and then execute on that. So I think we're really positioned to be kind of what we think is a unique blend of strategy to help them figure out the best path forward, and then execute that strategy and actually do all the work without contracting that work out. We'll actually do it with our team at Trellis and then integrate with their company very closely. We do a lot of things that kind of make us work very closely with customers that I think other people don't do as well. And then, one step further, we have a lot of flexibility to the way that we work with customers. So we can kind of augment their team and help them kind of scale up without necessarily having to hire a giant team, which, as you know, hiring technology people is expensive. So,
yeah, I know also that this is a very common question, but I keep listening the same one again and again. The same question is which e-commerce platform to choose and why.
Yeah, that's
it. Keeps appearing this question.
Well, I think it's an important question because it needs to be asked, because it's that question the answer may change over time. I mean, I think 5 years ago, people might not have said Shopify that often, right? Like it was not considered a viable solution for most companies, and now it is. So I think it's an important question to be evaluating, because the platforms are changing and the landscape's changing. But we take a pretty, we evaluate all the platforms, so we're aware of, SAP Hybris, Demandware, Salesforce, Oracle has a platform. IBM even has kind of I would consider a legacy platform. But we take the approach of really focusing on what we think the platforms are that have the best communities as well as technology. So to me, it's not just about the core technology. Obviously, that's important, but it's also about the community around it. Because when you are selecting a platform, you're not really just selecting the platform. You're selecting the extensions and the modules and the things that come with that platform, as well as the agencies and the other people that have expertise that you can hire to do the work on that platform. So I think it's super important to make sure you're aware of what that community is and where that community is trending when you select a platform. And that's why we're very bullish on Shopify, Magento, and BigCommerce, especially. Those three platforms we feel like have, at this point, the best technology and also a really great community around them. And they all kind of have their pros and cons, and it's a hard thing to answer quickly about which is better, because it really depends on the use case and the business. And then I think there's a place for WooCommerce, but I think WooCommerce is a weird platform in that it's so heavily used because of the prevalence of WordPress. But to be honest, I think it's an inferior platform from an e-commerce standpoint to a Shopify, BigCommerce, and Magento. So like I said, it's hard to answer all this at once, but I think to me, the clear leaders right now are Magento, Shopify, and BigCommerce. And I think if you're looking at a new e-commerce build, they should pretty much always be in the conversation, a pretty high percentage of the time. And then I think the other platforms out there, to me, are really just niche players because they don't have a big user base. And because they don't have a big user base, they don't have a big community. And maybe some people in some of these other communities might get upset, but at the end of the day, you got to look at the numbers, and it's pretty drastic difference between the user base of these platforms like Magento, Shopify, WooCommerce, and BigCommerce. They're powering the vast majority of these of the top 1 million sites, or even top 100,000 sites. I think you see Salesforce, Demandware doing pretty well in the top enterprise, but it's a much more niche.
It depends case by case. I think, right? If they are very niche, if there are some e-commerce platforms that are very niche and you are in that niche,
Yeah.
maybe it's a good option.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, I agree with you that if you are not in a niche, then is considering the community around a platform is very important, because you could solve mm, almost any situation appearing, and they
Yeah.
appear. They end
Yeah,
up appearing.
exactly. It doesn't make sense to custom build things from the ground up unless you're, Amazon, or you have this massive engineering team that you can.
Definitely.
So the community will help you build these things faster, and a lot of these things are more pre-built and just need to be configured versus custom building. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay,
So
regarding this, now that we've talked about platforms, um, do you see major bottlenecks that manufacturers have in their e-commerce activities? Is
yeah, in terms of the platforms, or just
in
in
terms of
general.
the platform, yeah, when integrating the platform.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think people really underestimate the fact that, like I said, you're really not selecting a platform. You're selecting a platform as kind of like a hub to all these other aspects of your business. So the platform is, yeah, that's where, people are going to be using. You're going to use that as a basis to have people add to cart and check out. But you might have an ERP system or a financial system, slash inventory system. You might have two or three backend systems, or maybe it could be one giant ERP system that really powers kind of like the business logic. Um, so you're going to have to integrate that into the platform. And in some cases, there's some pre-built solutions for that in certain scenarios, and those may work for you. But sometimes that might not work for you. Maybe you need a custom solution. And so that's where, it gets a lot more tricky. And I think people really underestimate the complexity there and the investment needed to make that work well. And then obviously there's more than that. I mean, now PIM, like you guys are getting very popular, and PIM has a whole new kind of almost like a new industry beyond the ERP. So I think we're just seeing that there's a lot more systems that people need to be successful, and connecting them to the e-commerce platform isn't so easy. And that's why I'm so big on the community, because the community builds a lot of these connectors and solutions around the platforms. Yeah.
Okay, and apart from platforms, what are the common challenges that, for
Yeah.
instance, manufacturers have? Because, for instance, one of the main challenges that we find is the change management. No,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
um, what do you see in organizations normally?
Yeah, I was actually literally about to just say that. I think that that's the other biggest challenge besides the technical and that challenge. I mean, the technical challenge is partly a change management challenge. So I think manufacturers have traditionally been, they can kind of be behind the scenes, sell to Target, sell to Walmart, these big orders, and they'll do the selling for me. And unfortunately, like, you can't really rely on that business model anymore. You got to be more forward facing. So I think a lot of manufacturers are facing, and even distributors too, are facing kind of like an identity crisis of like how they go to market, because they could go direct to consumer on their website, and then they get scared. Well, maybe that's going to ostracize our distribution base, or their wholesale base when they go direct to consumer. And then they could also start doing B2B e-commerce on their website and selling to distribution through their website, which a lot of people are obviously trying to do as well. So I think there's kind of like a very big evolutionary shift that manufacturers need to take, and they really need to ask themselves, what's their vision? I think it's pretty obvious that people want to buy digitally, like whether you're a consumer or whether you're a wholesaler or distributor that wants to buy from a manufacturer. I mean, I don't want to call you and you know, fax in an order. I mean, we're a B2B company, and we buy
Mm-hmm.
stuff online all the time for our business. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what we want. So I think at the end of the day, everyone wants to buy digitally because it's easier and more convenient. And I think manufacturers need to ask themselves, from a change management process, like you said, are they going to commit to that shift? And then how are they going to evolve and change their business model, or business operations to sell digitally? And maybe that's just only selling online to other businesses, or maybe it's selling direct to consumer. But they have to really answer that question and stick to that answer and execute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also another of the challenges that we normally find is the legacy systems connected with e-commerce. For small organizations, when you use cloud-based solutions, for instance, Zapier is a great way to connecting different platforms. But what about ERPs as old as AS400? That is still some companies are using it.
We've done multiple AS400 integrations to
There are still
Magento
thousands out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that companies, they really need to evolve. I mean, I think that the problem is everyone's building technical debt on these systems, and how long can you stay competitive on these systems, you know? So I think people are kind of just, dealing with it, and kind of like maybe they'll, hire someone like Trellis to build this custom integration. But I think long term, they really need to really seriously decide, like, how long can I stay on this, and when do I need to make the leap to something a little more modern that works more friendly with an e-commerce platform? And I do think more and more people we're seeing are making that leap. But I think because the ERP is such a complicated operational tool, people are scared to kind of change it,
Yeah.
So
it's a multi-year project.
Yeah.
Changing the ERP.
So I think that the con is that it's hard to make the legacy system work well with an e-commerce platform because they weren't designed to have good APIs and that good real-time integration capabilities that you want nowadays. So that's a pretty big con. I mean, honestly, there's not that many pros to legacy systems. There's mostly cons. So honestly, I think that most companies should be really figuring out what's their migration path to something a little more modern in terms of back office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always explain to customers when they are considering the PIM, they sales layer in this case, and it's the same with e-commerce platforms. You don't have to consider just that specific platform, because at the end it's going to be part of a much bigger ecosystem of corporate solutions, and in that ecosystem there are new generation, old generation, and very old legacy systems in place. So integrating all them, I think, combined with change management, both are the most challenges, or the biggest. Both are the biggest challenges now that we face.
Yeah, and they kind of go hand in hand. I mean, you have to integrate them at a base level, and I think what I would do is, if I was an organization, is I would invest in kind of the basic integration that I needed to kind of be more modern from an e-commerce standpoint, and then start to change the organization and put the people in place that are capable of handling the change and bringing the systems to a more modern standpoint, including the back office, ERP, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's
yeah. And now it's time to ask this question. So when do you consider a PIM in this ecosystem? When do you?
Yeah, that's a great question.
There must be some situations where you just find a customer that told that, and you see, look, you need a PIM in place. So when do you think is a good time to consider it?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're seeing a lot more people that have already made the leap and they already have it, but obviously there's a lot of people that don't and still are not sure when to get one. I think to us, when someone, let's just say they're just selling on their website, then they could probably get away with the e-commerce site almost being their PIM. But I think when you're an organization that has more complexity and more sales channels, or maybe more, like I think you mentioned, more departments internally that need to access this data in different ways, I think once you need to send data to different types of people in different formats, whether that's internally or externally to different types of customers, that's when it's time to start considering a PIM, because e-commerce platforms, they can do some of what a PIM does at a very, very basic level, but ultimately they're for e-commerce and not for PIM. And so it's going to fall short when you need to kind of send that data to different places in different formats, especially. So I think as soon as you're kind of like selling to, even 2 or 3 different channels, it's time to consider a PIM. So
yeah,
and
I agree.
So.
Yeah, I agree. Also, when you have a huge catalog with many specifications, it's also a good time to.
One thing to add to that is, we do see some large companies where they have their catalog is complicated because the data is coming from many different sources. So
Hmm.
they might not be creating the data themselves. And, I think a PIM is a good place to kind of unify that data. So.
Hmm. Yep. Another question that I have for you, maybe some, or well, I think mm, most of companies or a big percentage of companies have already tried with their platform, e-commerce platform, but they failed. So, have you seen companies who have started on their e-commerce journey, but they failed and then they come to you as a fix? I don't know if
Yeah,
you have any examples about it.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's tough. I mean, e-commerce is obviously not easy, and I think it's also that technology is not easy. And um, you know, as much as in theory, yes, you could build a very simple e-commerce site. Like in theory, yes, you could install Shopify, throw up a theme, and build a site yourself pretty cheaply. Is that going to actually
Mhm.
make you a competitive business? And the answer is probably not. So most businesses really need to have a more competitive website, and that requires thought out strategy, a thought out design plan and operational plan, as well as execution of the development. Um, and we see a lot of companies that just aren't capable of doing that themselves, which is obviously why they come to us. So, I think it's good to just use these use cases just to give the specific examples. So Thermacell, they're a great company, great people. They came to us basically, he's like, they've had kind of struggles with e-commerce, and they had, I guess you'd call it, they had failed 3 times in that they had built 3 different sites over the course of like 3 or 4 years. So it's kind of like a running joke they're a very successful company, but the site wasn't. And it was kind of like a running joke within the organization, like, oh, how many times are we going to rebuild this? Like, because obviously they're going to rebuild it again with us. So when they came to us, they're like, this is it. We're building something that needs to last 3 to 5 years, and it needs to make us do a better job and help us get to the next level. And that's where I think we can really help people, as long as they kind of stick to the plan and the mindset that you really need to be successful. And um, they we helped them select. So they were thinking about 3 different platforms, and it was not an easy decision, to be honest. I think they could have gone 2 different ways. So we helped them evaluate Suite Commerce, Shopify, and Magento. It was very close between Magento and Shopify, in our opinion. And we kind of gave them the case for both and why they could get benefits on either platform. Ultimately, they made the decision. It was up to them to make the decision. They made the decision to go with Shopify, and we worked with them to kind of really make sure that there's a thought out, scalable strategy. And we launched about a year ago, within pretty much within budget, pretty much within timeline. There might have been a plus or minus of a small amount there, but they're super happy with us. And now they have a site that scales and has grown significantly in terms of sales. So I think, like I said, it's all about having that strategy and then sticking to it and making sure that you have scalable infrastructure in place to grow on. So we still work with them today and manage the site and make improvements to the site. So
Mhm.
I think the key there is it really comes down to selecting the platform and doing the requirements up front and making sure that's all well thought out, and as well as like maybe you have future requirements that the platform can handle. So I think also a mistake that people make is like, well, the platform might be able to handle your needs right now, but what about in 3 years? So we try and keep that in mind. Obviously, it's hard to predict all future requirements. And then the other use case I think that we were going to get to was Mother Dirt, and they were on WooCommerce. So it's not like they had failed. They were a great startup company. They used WooCommerce to get off the ground. They were doing well, but they were hitting scaling problems. Um, I don't want to say that either of these companies completely failed. I think it's more of a scaling issue. I think most people are able to get something off the ground. It's a question of, can it scale and help your business grow? So with Mother Dirt, it was a little bit simpler in that they had already kind of made the decision to go with Magento for a very specific reason in that they needed kind of the ability to customize subscription, customize checkout, and they wanted kind of that control over a platform. And Magento obviously offers that pretty much, I'd say, better than anyone in the market. we helped them execute on Magento, and specifically, I think the thing that helped them the most was they have kind of like the food industry. They have perishable items, so
Hmm.
they
Oh,
need
really?
very specific ship dates, and the shipping is very complex. It's like, it's based on the days and all these different parameters. And that was like almost impossible for them to execute on WooCommerce the way they wanted. And to be honest, I think there's a lot of other problems with WooCommerce that I'm not going to get into right now, but we were able to solve those problems on Magento. And it sounds like, I think they said something like 80% of their customer service inquiries went away. It was a pretty high percent. Don't hold me to that, but a lot of their
Okay.
customer service inquiries went away because now the shipping, like, it was kind of programmatically working so customers could understand it on the website, and it got to them the right way. And that wasn't the case before.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting cases.
Yeah.
So
So
we
I think,
are. Mhm. Yeah.
no, go
Say it.
ahead.
Okay, no. We are coming to the last question of this webinar. So, and it's about 2019. What are the challenges and trends that you see for this current year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like you said, it's all about change management. I mean, I think companies,
Hmm.
it's time to, in my opinion, to commit to digital. Like, what that means is like digital first, in store,
Hmm.
offline second. Like, um, you have to commit to it to make it successful. And that I think a lot of companies, it's like, oh, well, we only make a little bit on e-commerce, so
Yeah.
we're only going to put this much money into it. And it's like, no, it's actually the opposite. You need to put all your money into it in terms of as an
Hmm.
investment, because that is where the market is going. People don't want to buy offline anymore because it's time consuming and not as convenient. So I think the challenge is the change management process of getting on board with that trend, of obviously almost all shopping, B2B and B2C, kind of going online, and then executing on a program to increase online sales. In terms of specific trends we see for e-commerce, I would say personalization is a big one, for both B2B, and B2C. On the B2B side, it's about personalizing the pricing and the experience so that, you might have special terms with that customer. Maybe you have some sort of credit system built into the e-commerce that we're doing with customers, so that they can, buy via credit because they've been with you for 20 years as a customer, and you're willing to give them net 60 on terms and things like that, but you don't do that for other customers. So B2B personalization, and on the B2C personalization, I think we're seeing a big trend towards uh, where it's like kind of the graphic UI personalization. So personalizing the products and the images on the products so that you can, like, kind of like the Nike is the best example. Obviously Nike was kind of the leader there, but now there's a lot of new technology now that we can leverage for customers at a fraction of the cost of obviously what it costs Nike to build that. So it's actually very affordable to do that now. It's not cheap necessarily, but it's affordable in my opinion. And I think companies should be moving in that direction to kind of personalize on the B2C side and build more unique experiences that way. So obviously there's a lot more to it than that. So personalization to me is big. And I think the other big trend is social media. I mean, companies really need to realize that social media is now in my opinion, de facto branding tool in the world.
Hmm.
Yeah, you could spend money on TV ads, but how long is that really going to last and be successful? I think social media is the way to get brand awareness. You have to look at it as a brand awareness tool, not necessarily like immediately it's going to get me sales. But I do think as you build brand awareness on social media, there are ways to kind of creatively integrate that into your e-commerce experience, and make uh, that kind of integration between social media and e-commerce closer so that you're converting more of those customers. And there are some tools out there that we're seeing that are pretty cool around that. Um,
Hmm.
and then the other one is obviously artificial intelligence. I think you're also seeing a lot of
Hmm.
big
Yeah.
AI tools, search tools. Maybe it could even be in the PIM tool that, I think you're just seeing AI built into all these different SaaS platforms. So that's kind of tying back to the ecosystem conversation that we had earlier. We see the e-commerce platform as the key, like, central hub of the ecosystem, and then you might have 10 different SaaS platforms for various specific needs like search or reviews or rewards points or whatever it may be. It could be PIM, obviously. And then those SaaS solutions have AI built into them more and more, and that can be plugged into the e-commerce store. So you could actually leverage AI without, having $1 million AI engineers on staff by just simply buying some of these solutions that may have those people at their company, but you're just buying their SaaS solution. So
yeah, I think it's not about AI solutions, but about solutions that include the AI capabilities, no, or that use AI to improve processes or improve
yeah,
the user
exactly.
experience.
Search
Right.
is probably the easiest example, because there's all these search platforms. So you plug that into the e-commerce platform, and the search companies themselves, the SaaS platforms, have built AI into their search.
Okay, so very interesting. Many thanks, Isaiah, because we've covered problems about implementing e-commerce. We've been talking about different platforms. We've been talking about legacy systems. We've been talking about PIM, bottlenecks, challenges of 2019. So absorbing, insightful update. As always, thanks for your time today, Isaiah. Also, thanks to everyone for joining us in this webinar. And let's keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for putting this together, and thank your team as well, because I know they worked on this too. So we really appreciate you thinking of us and inviting us on.
Okay, as always, a pleasure. Thank you, Isaiah. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.